time, with mass support being introduced, and just before with local authorities becoming responsible, there was a commensurate increase in attacks. You are in the arena where people are detained without charge or trial and are held for extremely long periods of time. You have foreign national prisoners who are now seen in the newspapers as being the greatest evil, who everyone assumes, because they have committed a crime, they deserve to also be punished because they are foreigners, by having themselves deported. The fact that they have served the same sentence as a British national, the fact that they may have lived here for virtually their whole life, the fact that they may have British and other settled spouses, and they have children living in the UK, is ignored. They still deserve it, and their British spouses deserve it because they married this foreign national who committed a crime. And that's how I see it. But the greatest criminal act of the state at the moment, I think, is the fact that once they complete their sentences, you find that foreign national prisoners will remain in criminal detention for years. They might be sentenced to 1 year. They'll be told they're going to get parole after 6 months. They get kept in criminal detention for the complete sentence. And then you'll find that 3 years beyond the sentence, they may still be in detention. Years beyond the sentence. We worry about whether or not we should expand detention for terrorist suspects from 28 days to 42 days. But believe me, that ain't the issue. I was speaking recently to journalists about this issue, and honestly, I mentioned the fact that people being detained for 3 years, they were foreign national prisoners, but beyond their sentence, didn't bat an eyelid. We have to really pull people back and make them understand this is actually a serious issue. People's liberty is at stake. We have human rights legislation which cannot cope with this. Because in the end, immigration law allows for detention for the purpose of removal. There was a recent case this month called the SK. I can give you the citation later if you want it to come through. Dealing with a Zimbabwean national who had been detained for some sexual offences, the worst of the worst. Fine, he had been detained for years beyond his sentence, and the issue was whether or not he could be removed. Alongside this, there's been another case dealing with Zimbabweans, which is still subject to a Court of Appeal decision, as to whether or not Zimbabweans who've been refused asylum should, by that very fact, having been an asylum seeker, be allowed to remain. And associated with that is how does the Zimbabwean government deal with Zimbabwean nationals who may be removed, who are forcibly removed to Zimbabwe? This project, and it relates to what I've been talking about is preparing cases for the High Court. And when you're preparing cases for the High Court, it needs diligence. It needs you to think about getting the Home Office to state what it's doing. You need to elucidate from the Home Office the overall picture of what's happening on a case. You need to get them to confirm their commitments on what steps they are taking, so that a few weeks, a few months later, you can turn around and say every couple of weeks we've been applying for release or bail, every month for bail. These are the results. The Home Office has been saying this in their bail summaries. Well, look now what's been going on. Without legal aid, you are restricted in what you can do in terms of the resources. With legal aid, nowadays you have fixed fees, so actually it's very hard to decide to spend a lot of time on a case, but believe me, in immigration, I think all lawyers know that the more time you spend on a case, the more thought you give to it, the more you can run a fine-tooth comb over what the client meant, what was intended, what evidence actually says. The more time you can research evidence, the more chance you're going to have of winning your case. And fixed fees cuts a swathe through all of that, and cuts the chances of asylum seekers. Instead of abolishing legal aid, which they tried to do before, they've basically undercut us all. We're also a bit involved in other issues such as trying to challenge the Legal Services Commission in the way they are funding the detained fast track